The aftermath of World War I left Europe in a state of devastation and disarray, with Germany, one of the major defeated powers, facing a particularly bleak scenario. The post-war period, known as the interwar years, spanned from the armistice of 1918 to the consolidation of the Nazi regime under the leadership of Adolf Hitler in the 1930s. During these years, Germany experienced a combination of economic, political, and social challenges that laid the groundwork for momentous events, including the rise of Nazism.
1. Treaty of Versailles and peace conditions.
The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, imposed draconian conditions on Germany. This treaty not only humiliated the country by attributing primary responsibility for the war, but also set forth a series of punitive terms that had long-term consequences. Among the most impactful clauses was the reduction of the German army, the cession of territories to other nations, and the payment of massive reparations to the victors. The financial burden imposed by war reparations was especially overwhelming for the German economy. Soaring inflation and the loss of resource-rich territories exacerbated the country's economic situation. Both industry and agriculture were affected, and demobilized, labor returned home to face unemployment and a lack of opportunities.
2. Hyperinflation and economic collapse.
Germany's economic situation rapidly deteriorated as the 1920s progressed. Hyperinflation took hold of the Weimar Republic, the government established after the war. The unrestrained printing of money to cope with war reparations and other financial obligations led to an uncontrollable spiral of inflation. The value of the German mark became virtually non-existent, with scenes of citizens carrying bundles of banknotes to buy basic necessities becoming commonplace. This economic collapse had a devastating impact on the daily lives of Germans, eroding their savings and reducing their quality of life to alarming levels.
3. Massive unemployment and social discontent.
Hyperinflation and economic collapse translated into massive unemployment. Factories closed, businesses went bankrupt, and production plummeted. Millions of Germans found themselves without jobs and, therefore, without means of livelihood. This widespread unemployment generated deep social and political unrest, fueling the discontent that would eventually be channeled into more extreme political options. Living conditions deteriorated rapidly. Food shortages, a lack of resources, and the government's inability to provide an effective social safety net caused widespread suffering. The gap between social classes widened, and resentment towards those perceived as responsible for the situation, whether the government or specific groups, intensified.
4. Political polarization and society's radicalization.
The Weimar Republic, established in 1919, found itself in the midst of political turmoil. Political polarization intensified as extremist groups from both the right and left fought for control. The Freikorps, paramilitary units formed by disgruntled war veterans, and communists engaged in violent street clashes. The government's inability to contain these tensions and form stable political coalitions exacerbated the instability. Political parties, instead of collaborating to address the country's challenges, often sank into mutual hostility. This political division and social fragmentation created fertile ground for charismatic leaders who promised quick and radical solutions.
5. Political instability in the Weimar Republic.
The Weimar Republic, though proclaimed as a democracy, was plagued by structural weaknesses. The parliamentary system, influenced by the Weimar Constitution, allowed for the election of a president with significant powers. This, coupled with the proportionality of the electoral system, facilitated the formation of unstable coalitions and weak governments. Attempts at coups and political uprisings became common. Adolf Hitler, a former soldier and member of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, attempted a coup in 1923 known as the Beer Hall Putsch. Although it failed and Hitler was arrested, this event highlighted the vulnerability of the Weimar Republic to political turmoil.
6. Nazi ideology spread and Hitler's rise.
The The spread of Nazi ideology and Hitler's rise were intrinsically linked to the ability of the NSDAP to use propaganda effectively. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda, played a crucial role in manipulating information and creating a compelling narrative. The NSDAP mobilized skillfully, organizing massive rallies and events that generated enthusiasm and popular support. Nazi symbolism, slogans, and Hitler's charismatic rhetoric resonated among the disenchanted masses. Propaganda also focused on the promise to restore Germany's greatness, emphasizing heightened nationalism and the search for a common enemy, those deemed responsible for Germany's post-war humiliation.
7. Elections and consolidation of Nazi power.
The rise of Nazism was reflected in election results. In 1930, the NSDAP became the second-largest political force in the Reichstag. 2 years later, in 1932, the party became the largest, and Hitler was appointed chancellor in 1933. The Enabling Act, passed shortly thereafter, granted dictatorial powers to Hitler, marking the beginning of the dismantling of the remaining democratic institutions.
8. International factors and diplomacy.
The international reaction to Hitler's rise was mixed. While some nations were concerned about the implications of Nazism, others, tired of instability in Europe, sought to appease Germany. Agreements such as the Locarno Pact, 1925, and the appeasement policy led by the UK and France attempted to calm tensions, but ultimately failed to prevent the aggressive expansion of the Third Reich. International factors and the lack of a unified response from Western powers allowed Hitler to carry out a series of actions that eventually triggered World War II. The invasion of Poland in 1939 marked the beginning of a conflict that would change the course of world history.
Conclusion.
In summary, the post-war historical context in Germany was a mixture of disastrous economic conditions, political instability, social polarization, and accumulated resentment. The harsh conditions imposed by the Treaty of Versailles and the subsequent hyperinflation created a breeding ground for radicalization and the pursuit of extreme solutions. The Weimar Republic's inability to address these challenges opened the door to the rise of authoritarian leaders like Adolf Hitler, whose mastery of propaganda and mass mobilization allowed him to consolidate dictatorial power. These events laid the groundwork for World War II and altered the course of 20th century history.